Welcome to the introductory session of the Legacy Project. One thing we've always known about our father and loved about our father is that he is committed to sharing wisdom and to facilitating the process of growing and learning and getting through life by helping people by sharing what he knows. So we wanted to actually get it on tape at this point, have that legacy fulfilled. And this is the first of 3 sessions. This one is being filmed on location in Weston, Connecticut. I have here with me
Paige.
who is, how old?
6.
We have
Shay.
who is
10.
Marion, who is 65 still.
Kelly, who's 13.
I'll give you a hint.
Oh, I know, there it
Here.
is. 70.
And we have behind the camera Jules Cobb, all the way from Kings Lynn, England.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
As the best I can recall. Yes. Am I doing right all right so far? Yeah.
Yes.
Would you care to
How
name
old
them?
were they? How old were they, she said? And what were their names?
Well, most of them started out as like less than 1, and then they got older as they went along.
How old are they right now?
Oh, many of them aren't here anymore. My oldest brother's name was Ivan, and he expired. His time was up.
He died.
He died. My next oldest was a sister, Helen, and she also died. Yeah. And then there was Ken, my brother Kenneth. Yes.
How many years older were they than you?
Oh, these were much, much older. We would have to talk about Ivan as being 3 and 12 is 15 years older than I was. Helen was 2 and 12, 14 years older. And Ken was 12 years older. And then there was, sadness. There was some sadness in the family. There was a baby, Donald, and he was very young and he died. It used to be that when you got pneumonia, he died. They didn't have penicillin, and so Donald got pneumonia and he died before he was a year old. Then I have a sister, yes, Phyllis. And she is 5 years older than I am, and she is doing just fine. Yells at her husband regularly, he yells at her, and then they kind of rush around and do things together. Yeah. And that's the story about my brothers and sisters.
Do you miss your mom and dad?
Yeah, I do. Moms and dads are special. They're special people. They spend a lot of time taking care of you. And my dad had a special way of talking about people. And it's like you look back on things that you emulate, and you wonder who you're emulating, and then you say, aha, there it was. George Edgar Muma was my father, and he spoke well of people. His virtue was to figure out something nice about someone. When you talk about them, talk about their qualities.
It's so nice to be around somebody like that.
Yeah, and my mother had such a strong desire for her children to be complete. She wanted to learn things, and go places and do things. most of all. Her one great wish that turned out to be a total failure was music. She wanted one of her 6 children to make sounds on any instrument that you could think of so that you'd want to hear it. He'd take the positive, he would describe the qualities. He came to see me in Florida when I was in the Navy, and a big negative thing broke out at work when he was gone. And he would have a way of just talking about the union organizers and how they were representing the people, and that the reason they were representing the people was because they'd been mistreated, and therefore they had a right to do this thing. And it was a helpful tool for me to, when you look at any situation, there's some problem there, but on the other side, there's a valuable purpose being served. And Marion re-energized that whole subject for me, because when she would come home from work talking about the struggle that the labor movement had with employers that didn't treat them well. So it's kind of a link between my father and my wife in terms of, if you don't treat people right. So that's George. George Edgar, 66 years old.
The question on the table was, what kinds of characteristics you imbued into the family environment to make us all turn out so incredibly well?
So what things, I think probably an element was that I allowed your mother to influence your education a lot. And I don't know that you could deny one parent access to the children if they have wisdom on the subject, but it would seem like, well, let's go to the movie, let's not do our homework, and Marion would be taking that role.
I think she had higher educational standards.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she would read the paper that you were going to go be turning in the morning. She would read it, and it was almost like, I don't think you can go to school with a paper that's written like that.
Did you do that? Because I do that.
Oh, yes.
I don't
was
remember
the bad
that.
guy. I was the bad guy.
I don't remember
She
you
does
doing
do that.
But I do
I'll say
that
it's
to
fine. This is how everybody in my grade writes. She goes, no, it's not good enough. She'll correct all of it and make me go fix it.
Outside activities were one thing that was encouraged. We both agreed that outside activities are good. You can go play softball, if you can do basketball, for sporting activities, if you can get into arts and crafts, some way where you can act out creative stuff, external activities in music.
awareness of other cultures and travel. Was that something that you two just created together, or was that part of your family's approach to it?
That all burst on our consciousness when we went to Chicago. If you want to know about what it was to add another dimension that was not generally available to families in our cultural realm, was the journey to Chicago. What it did was it put you in a new environment that you hadn't been or wouldn't normally get into. It put us into a new environment that we hadn't been in across culture. I mean, we had classes, we'd have a weekend class in what do the Muslims do, or what do the Hindus do, kind of a world religion issue that opened your mind to this kind of stuff. But the reason that you picked something like that, your consciousness has been expanded from your life's experience. Part of our extension is with grandchildren to the world. We're suggesting that at least for some journey into another nation, which you did with Mexico, and then you went on to Spain and traveled around Europe, you get this planet which is so big and so diverse that when you go down to Western school, it's harder to get it.
Say that your approach to family and to raising family and what you thought was important changed along the way?
Oh, yeah, the economic element was such a dramatic change. I mean, my father was poor and got rich, and so I was kind of a silver spoon kid, but I did figure I wanted to have that kind of a spoon. I wanted to have wealth for my wife and my family. And so I started down the road where you would get jobs and make money, and you work long hours and get this thing. And we took that giant step which said no to economics. We said we're going to engage in a social learning process, maybe a give back to society project, experimentation. We're going to do this. And in the process, we went from all this money, buying stuff, typical suburban junk stuff, everybody's got to have this now, you got to have that now, to no. We said no, and the economics went like that. And we were living on maybe one present for Christmas. Not everyone gives you a present, but one present. Your birthday comes and you get one present and not very much money into it. So we just took kind of a poverty, I guess would be the proper word for it. And it was so dramatic. It was so dramatic.
And free.
And free.
Clearly there's an understanding the value of the dollar, which is, I think, a lesson that any kid learns when they go from one status to another, economic status to another. That's a good question about heritage, because as a grandchild who has 4 different grandparents, she's trying to figure out who the heck she is.
She knows. Kelly?
Right. What's your heritage, right? Yes.
Well, you get it from my mother and my father, and then you get it from your grandmother to your mother. So you kind of like have 4 legs on this table. So I can tell you about my 2 legs, but there's still 2 over there. And then over on your dad's side, you got 4 legs over there. So you got 8 legs on this table. Then I'm going to talk about 2 of the 8 legs. Okay? My mother. My mother was English. Her mother and father both came from the UK. So you got 2 English legs on my mother's side out of the 16 legs. We now have 16 legs on this
camera
table.
Woman is cheering.
Right, go UK. So you got the 16 legs on there. So 2 of my 4 legs are from the UK. My father's side has 2 legs out of the 16 legs, and you got to run back all the way to Alsace-Lorraine, which is kind of a French-German area, depending on when you lived there and when you left. Sometimes it was French and sometimes it was German. And on my father's mother's side, they were back over to the UK again. So you got 3 out of the 4 legs. Not the name, the Muma name is coming from the Alsace-Lorraine French English. In fact, it was de Muma, D-E-M-U-M-M-A, when they chased them out of the country for throwing. Oh my, I have to tell you this.
I heard it. Crayons.
Spill the beans about that, yeah. So heritage, that would be your heritage. You'd have, on my side of my 4 table legs, you'd have 3 UK, 1 parlez-vous français, oui oui, for sure, mademoiselle.
And Graham's is,
Well, it's incredibly similar. My mother's side was, as far as I know, both mother and father. her mother and father were English. Laughlin sounds very English. And I don't know about my grandfather's, other than the fact that his name was Laughlin, I don't know anything about it. But I know my grandmother was born in Blackburn, England, and her maiden name was, the name of the English poet is
Barrett.
Barrett, right. Which is, of course, on my father's side, he had a mother whose maiden name was Sonner, which is German, I'm sure, and that's the family that we could trace back to know that they came from Alsace-Lorraine. And my father's name being Kintner is very German. I don't know much about that, except it was obviously German. So it's like you got almost the same identical background on both of our sides.
Is there anything special you learned from any part of your family?
Oh, yeah, good question. Special learning, I mean, there are just a range of people in your past, you know, that are in your family, and each one picks out little things that they transfer to you. But my sister Helen was, you know, she taught me to walk, and she changed my diaper, you know. I mean, this is an interesting, I don't know if you've changed any of your, no, you don't do diapers.
I was the youngest, so I couldn't do any since there was no one after me, so I was.
I was
Okay.
putting,
Oh.
that's what I was putting it before.
Oh, spelling, yeah.
It's like the C or one.
Yeah. You know, so you get gifts from people that you encounter, and they kind of lock in as a reusable phrase or a reusable piece of information. I think.
Who taught you to drive?
Oh, my brother Ken, that was exciting. I had a newspaper route in the old days. You used to peddle newspapers on your bike, and you'd go pick them up at the paper station and go. Well, he took me out one Sunday morning when the papers were thicker on Sunday, you know, that day. And he took me with his car, and we did my paper route. And then he pulled over. We weren't home yet. We were done peddling papers. We weren't home. He pulled over and he stopped and he said, "Get out of the car. It's going to beat me."
How
What
old
did I
is you?
I'm not going to say.
Basically, he doesn't have a driver's license yet.
That was pages. I think I must have been about 11 or 12. Well, he would have been home from the war, and that was 1945, so I was probably 13. And you weren't supposed to be driving at 13. He said, "Get out of the car." So he got out of the car, and I went and got into the driver's side, and he taught me how to drive a car.
Here's a question. When you look at your children and your grandchildren, do you see any George or Mary characteristics?
There's a quietness about Shade that's I think is probably going to be the closest of the six to George. There's a quietness about her that when she speaks, she's thought about it, and I think it's probably the characteristic. I got an experience of it in Wales, and it's just kind of sporadic, you know, when you feel something like that happen. But I don't know, my mother and I, it was not the best relationship. I loved her and she cared for me.
I don't know, I knew her, and I didn't watch her raise you, but part of, I think, what makes a mother feel comfortable even doing that is knowing that you have other nurturers and caregivers around you.
Mm-hmm.
So she knew you had Helen, and you had Phyllis, and you had Ken, and you were in good hands, because I feel that way sometimes with my kids, that if it can't be me, I know they have Jules and they have each other. And
Yeah. I think she was probably the proudest of me in many respects, because she saw my children probably more than, although Mark and Marilyn were there, you know, they were across the alley, she watched them race, but I think she was probably proud. They had the most education of any of them. Economics was, you know, and I think she really liked Marion.
I
So,
really liked her. She raised 6 kids on nothing, right? They lived in a garage home for a while.
oh, this is a journey. After World War I, from way back then, they bought an army tent. And this was a fairly large army tent, about 20 by 20. And they built a wooden floor, and they lived in this army tent. Had 2 children in the army tent. And while they lived in the army tent, he built a 2-car garage. And when they had this big celebration, they moved from the army tent into the garage. And it was so big that all the relatives started coming to stay with them. 2 kids, now up to 3 kids. Aunts and uncles and cousins came to stay with them. They had this big garage. And then, in living in the garage, he built a 2-story house.
When did he finish? What year?
Well, they were in the house when Donald died. So if you could figure out when he was born, I roughly figure he was born 1925. So, 1924. And then, after he built the house, right now, there's an engineering question here that's challenging.
You say built it, you mean he was
He
pounding
built it,
nails?
hammers, saws, nails and stuff. He'd come home from work and he got the house all done. And he says, oh, I think we should have a basement in this house. Right, here's the house that's standing there. Right, we're going to dig a hole underneath the house and build a basement.
Did he?
Yeah. But it was a very short basement. Of course, he was a short man. I was the tallest one in the family. A short man, and so we didn't need to be a very tall basement, right? Well, you don't want to go down his basement. If you're over 5'8", you're going to bang your head somewhere along the way.
What,
I
and
think
you were all born at home? None of you 6 were born in the hospital, right?
No, we couldn't afford a hospital then.
Some of them were born in the tent.
Some
That's
were
right.
born in the tent, some were born in the garage.
What you could have done differently in raising your children?
What would you have done?
Well, that's a difficult question because the presumption is that you want to have things turn out different than they did. In other words, if you want to change something, then that means that you don't like what happened.
And you don't want to do that because that's going to the negative side.
Right, and I don't do well over there. They would be suggesting that where they got it, I don't like to have. And I guess probably the only thing I would fault myself for in the rearing process would be to get my dad's wisdom transferred well. I think the upbringing didn't produce the always be able to say something nice about people. I think you do well at it, and Bruce and Brian do well at seeing the positive side of what's going on in life. I don't walk into your room and think, oh my, we're going to be spending a lot of time in gloom here. Life isn't perfect for any one of the 3 of you, but I don't despair going to see any of you because I'm going to have to spend time in a negative vein. So mainly it got through, but I guess the perfection that could conceivably have occurred would be that every time I saw you, I heard nothing but good.
That would be perfection.
That would be perfection.
Sitting around having a breakfast together, we thought we'd take a little deviation off of the question path and talk about family approaches to celebrations and meals and get-togethers. And I will say that I've always felt like family was important And that message came through very clearly from day one, although it shifted after Chicago in terms of the structure of it. But how would you say that your family, what would you say your values were in terms of?
But as when I was growing up, there was not a lot of total family celebration, because by the time I was like 5, a couple of them were married and gone.
They didn't come back with their kids and have a big get-together?
There were events like Thanksgiving and Christmas where everyone would get together and the kids would run around and yell and push. We didn't have a Pedro's to fall on us, but someone would fall on somebody before it was over.
Probably you.
Yeah. It got dramatically enhanced, and specifics were more carefully thought out. And that came from the individual and the family, a weekend course in Chicago. And the clarity that came was that you identify that which you love. You hold up and celebrate activities and people because you love them and you want to focus on it. I mean, the birthdays, as you may well remember, you were the one on that day. I mean, we made you the honored one. We went through a ritual, remember, of writing out stuff that all the rest of the family thought about you.
We still do that.
Yeah.
We do that in our family. Don't we, right? We get together and do our lists.
Yeah.
Still.
I think it was a powerful tool. I don't know that one precisely came out of the course, but my memory says everything came out of the course, so probably some didn't.
Yeah, I think we came up with that on our own. I think also the emphasis was on just as much on individual as on family. Like individual and family. And those family meetings, you might want to say a word about those.
That was another element that allowed us to focus on family problems, family events, what's going on in your life, what's coming up next. And then I think another element of it for me was a leadership training approach. You'd be in charge of a family meeting and had to kind of think through a structure that would say, when this meeting's done, we would have gone someplace with our thinking and our planning. I think one of the gifts that I learned from it was that all people focusing on one person is a real honoring process. And I think if you can have times where one person talks and everyone listens to that person, honoring the person, like right now, I mean, I feel very honored because everyone, 6 women are listening to me, and they're not saying much, so I'm really kind of an honored person here. Obviously, the one of the birthday person, I think that's really a great value, not only for the moment, for those who are engaging in thinking about their brother or sister, but the historical document. I mean, it gives you who you were when you were younger. Oh, I didn't realize that you thought about that, or I have that experience. I think that's a very critical one. One of the landmark events in the Muma family journey was Bay Valley. We took a weekend and we went to Bay Valley, and in a series of questions, structured questions about your life, you had to address what you thought it was going to be like. And it wasn't whether it ever turned out that way, although it's kind of fun to look back to some that did and some that didn't. Going through those structured questions, not only for the children but for the parents. I mean, I think Marion and I had some breakthroughs in who we were and what we were going to do, and so it isn't a process that's only for young people. I think where adults can engage in this process.
Missed a little is just trying to understand a little bit about their personalities that may be working their way through their offspring.
Mary had a tough life. She had to go to work after the 4th grade.
Shay, we're taking you out now. We're gonna put you in the canning
And
factory.
go to work in a canning factory. She had a brother named Sam. He moved away to Minnesota. She had a sister named Zella who moved to Michigan.
Canada.
Both from Canada to Michigan.
She don't wanna have a farm in Canada? Oh, right.
Her mother's name was Annie Grooms, and the Grooms is from groomsmen in UK. And, her dad came over.
How do you spell that?
Grooms.
Grooms, like good jackets.
Her father's name was Thomas, and things didn't go
Last
well.
name was Thomas?
Her father's first name was Thomas. That's how I got my middle name. Kevin got his middle name. Was from this guy who hung himself, so I keep away from apple trees because that's what got him. A tree reached down and grabbed him and hung him.
Why?
Don't know. Never did get any input on it. When he came to the United States, he went to work for an outfit called Continental Motors, and then Continental merged with an outfit called Detroit Industrial Vehicle Company, which shortened their name to Divco Twin Truck, and they made milk trucks, which is something that we don't have much of anymore. But it used to be that most people got their milk delivered to their house. They had a milkman who came around with this, well, originally he had a horse and a wagon, and then when these Divco trucks came out, they all wanted to get these trucks because you could stand up and drive the truck. The picture of all the cars and trucks we have now, everybody sits down, but these milk trucks you could stand up and drive.
We still have milk trucks
Okay?
in England, yeah.
Do you have any that stand up and drive?
I don't think so, no. I think they're all sit down.
That was a transition from when you had your horse, who kind
Uh-huh.
of stand up and tell the horse when to go. They made a movie with his trucks, and in the movie they were linking the fact that when the milkman had a horse, he could go to the first house, and then he could walk over to the second house, and then he could whistle, and his horse would come down the street. So he could come down and put the empties in and get more milk, and go up and deliver to the next couple houses, and then whistle for his horse to bring the cart down there. So the link in the movie, which was kind of funny, was they used a truck, a Divco truck, but they suggested that the truck would come when you whistled. So the guy would whistle and the truck would drive down the street. Well, things went astray, and the truck got a mind of its own and started smashing into things. A bit funny, I guess. Now we're into this volunteer element in my life. She's doing gardening, composting, volunteering with DIA. That's a nice transfer to her husband's pride, I guess you call it pride.
So what did she do for you? What did she, how has she made you a better person?
Well, I think her willingness to take risks has been a critical element in helping me, because everyone's a little nervous about taking a risk, and if anyone should show hesitation in risk taking, then if you love them, you'll kind of back off. You won't take this risky thing. And she was open to risks. I mean, to pack up and move to Highland Park, in a community that had a reputation for danger, to pack up and move to Chicago, in a city that clearly had danger, to say, okay, Carl, you don't have to have a job for a couple of years, was another element of risk. So I think what I learned from her was that taking a risk is taking a risk means that you're going to most likely do something that you're not doing, and that it opens up an opportunity to learn, to expand your consciousness. It's risky, but the possibilities of learning and knowing more about this thing is what Marie brought to the party, I think, is that you're risk-taking, that you can learn things that you might not otherwise learn.
Do you think that she's had an impact on your health over the years?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Running the way I would run would be to eat sweets and skip the vegetables and so on. She just made that part of her meal. Her social planning. The phone rings, she'll take that phone call. She will plan, well, shall we get the tickets to the opera this year, or should we go to Stratford? Shall we have dinner with the Cochrans to celebrate your birthday? And she does just a spectacular job of social planning. I really like that. About her beauty, she doesn't go crazy with wild outfits and wild makeup, and that probably wouldn't find beautiful, but I can be beautiful. I think one of the things I love about her is her care for other people. She'll call my sister-in-law and, help worry about Mildred. Lisa will have surgery and she'll go to help her. So her consciousness of helping other people. She's got a bad dad. And the other thing I really love about Mary, it's probably a thing that's kept us from killing each other all these years, is that she laughs at my jokes. If she didn't laugh at my jokes, life would
have married me.
Wouldn't have married you. I wouldn't have stayed married, because I need to hear your laugh or somebody's laugh.
She's laughing right now.
And so she's laughing at me.
What advice would you give your grandchildren about choosing a mate?
Well, that is a tough matter, but I think the element that I would count, there's three elements I have, but I think the one I would count most primary is know yourself. And that is, what is important to you? And I don't mean just today or tomorrow, but think in the long range. What is important to you? What do I know about myself? And I would even suggest that you list your virtues. Write down the things about yourself that you consider valuable things about yourself, valuable characteristics. I'm a listener, I'm attractive, I'm a good sport about things, I pay attention to my body, I exercise, or whatever the virtues are. List the traits that your best friend has.
What if we have more than one best friend?
Best
hopefully-
friends.
Yeah.
Best friends,
Best
yeah.
friends, yeah.
That's a lot of traits.
But the things you like
Things
best
you like.
about your friends.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have something you couldn't add to the script. Her name has to be Ralph.
Only marry a guy named Ralph. That's going to be the absolute rule. There's enough Ralphs out there. We should be okay. Then I think another exercise in, again, understanding yourself and what you consider important is to list things that you know and like about public figures. Now, for example, Paige Rose is high on Britney Spears. So, she might list that what she likes about Britney is her belly button. That could be an item that would show up on her list. Probably not yours, but that might show up on hers.
Not my list.
It's that kind of an analysis, what is it that you like about public figures? And they don't have to be entertainers necessarily, but
For me,
Um,
he needs a sense of humor.
Yeah, so you got it. And then this one is hard to speak to you about, but it's the second level is to follow your instincts, and that's not always easy because you get swept away with your emotions. This guy loves me, or this gal, whoever you're married. He loves me, and you get swept away by it's nice to be loved, and it is. That's an important characteristic. But your instincts tend to give you a better sense after what you're going to find long term. And then introduce the prospects to people who will give you honest feedback or honest information. So that might be your family, it might be your good friends. Guides for life for grandchildren.
Here we go.
Well, there's a term that I learned in the past, recent past, and it says, follow your bliss. And I don't quite know what that meant, and to follow your bliss, but I guess if I were going to try to give you what it means to me now, it would be that activity that gives you a combination of satisfaction, contribution, you feel like you're giving something to others, and that activity which is serious. Follow your bliss. Instructions for life. I think loving music, sing, dance, play, act are critical elements in a person's life. As I said earlier, I think studying religions is a recommendation I'd have for your lives, so that you know what it is the other people are betting on, as how to get to heaven, or how to get to nirvana, or whatever. You know about the other people that you encounter in your life. Frequently we cloister ourselves, we end up living with just Christians, or just Catholics, or just one small segment, and we don't branch out. So study religions, Hindu, Buddha, Muslim, and so on. Guides for life. Respect the planet. This sucker is getting hammered. We're putting pollutants into the air, we're putting pollutants into the water, we're tearing down rainforests, we're clearing out fish, we're getting rid of animals, without being careful of our planet. So respect the planet, air, water, plants, and animals. Protect your body, and that's not where armor plate. I'm not talking about. I'm talking about eating healthy. Read enough about what it is that you should put into your body, so that it will be healthy. Exercise it. One of the critical elements that causes much deterioration in maturing years is lack of exercise. So start it young and remember it, think about it, do it. I'm just delighted when I hear your mom getting on the treadmill, or your aunts and uncles doing things. Guides for life instruction. Honor art. View it, paint it, make it. Encounter the arts. It's an element that separates humans from most of the other things on the planet, is to cut and carve and shape and produce images, to draw a picture, to get a poster, view it, paint it, make it, honor art. Defend those who are less fortunate than you are. Remember the poor. Remember the weak. And think about the minorities. The last one, I don't know how to transfer it as well, but I've entitled it, Embrace Your Misfortune. They're going to be there. You got one right now. It's not so cool to have your mom and dad get a divorce, you know? That's not something that just makes you smile. It's a misfortune. So to embrace it, what would that mean, to embrace it? I mean, I can live with this thing. My life's going to be different, but there are others who have gone through it and they have said, I can hold on to my life. I can be a full person. So embrace your misfortunes. 28. So I have 8 guides for life.
Those are great. What's past 3? Maybe you should have gone all the way to 9.
Here we are out on Walnut Lake on a beautiful afternoon in September, and we are here talking with Carl Muma, and our topic today is community, and we thought it was only fitting to spend at least the first part of this interview, first installment, out in the community of Walnut Lake, which is a place that you've certainly spent a lot of the last 15 or 16 years. But it's certainly only one of the very many communities that you've had during your life. And so it's a good place to start. You know, the first question I was going to ask you, which may not be one on your list, but the first question I would have is, what is a community? What does that mean to you?
Well, I thought that was an interesting approach to how to split your story up from self to family to community. And so I reflected on the whole question of community, and it seemed to me that community takes on multiple elements. Like there's a geographical community, that's where you live. And so when you say, what's your community? You could say, well, I live on Pinehurst or Walnut Lake Road. Or you can talk about community in a sense of who it is that's around you, your neighbors, your church, maybe even your workplace, things that have to do with relationships with people. I think another element of community is probably the emotional response you have to the interplay of your geography and your people that are around you. So community for me is a 3-point element: where you live, who's there, and the relationship you take to the who and the whereness of your community.
Some of the most important communities that you've participated in, ones that have had the most influence on your life, be they geographic or
Monte Vista for 6 years, the house that had been built by one of my uncles for my grandmother, and my brother had lived there, was another sense after what a community might be. The Baptist church played a role in our lives. Bruce going to nursery school in a wagon was kind of an interesting trip because my mother had pulled me in a wagon to Sunday school. Peanut Book Club, met Barbara and Jack, very long-term friends. Marianne had a strong influence in her life by a guy named Ken Lee at the Baptist church. Talked about religion as it might be useful in life rather than a deterrent to your conduct. That address was followed by Myrtle Street in Madison Heights. There, a really determinative time in our community life with the Methodist Church there. Phil Townley and Carl Bealby said this is how a community maybe should conduct itself. Strong influence there. From that, visits to
to Chicago and subsequent moving to McLean, 29 McLean Island Park. It's a strong community influence here. We took on a role of people introducing our children to another culture. Bruce talks to this day about the conduct of himself being in a school with many black kids and having had come out of a Madison High School, which was all white. So this was a community change for the family and a community change in our attitude about what life is about.
That might have been, that experience in Chicago might have been the most important one in forming my understanding of community, which was quite different than probably any of the other kids in my generation, at least those that were born and raised in suburbia, because I saw the world as being made up of a diverse mix of people, all equal, of equal value, all of equal potential, and in fact, I probably had a feeling that black people were better than white people after that year, because I experienced warmth and friendship and acceptance to a greater extent than I had at any other point in my youth, and then and even going forward, I never felt that kind of acceptance as I did then. So
the return to suburbs with Wellesley, Pleasant Ridge added was the longest time we were in one place as a family together, 14 years from a community. And one of the things in community, I think, has to do with education. The schools are there and the learning processes are there. So this one was strong for us, and then we had 4 undergrads and 3 master's degrees and 1 doctor, all took place while we were resident in Pleasant Ridge. 14 years and an important time in our community living. Then, of course, the even longer one for Marion and I to be in one place, 17 years counting in Walnut Lake Road. This one produced some interesting, what you might call community, would be special residents nearby. Tilly Richards and Carl Revlin dramatized for us that you can live a long, healthy, and happy life. Both of them in their 90s and still alert and open to new things. The Walnut Lake address produced another whole sociological encounter for us, in that we got a broad base of ethnics, although the black we didn't have. We did have Hindu and Muslims and Jews and Christians and Chaldeans adding to our community encounter. Probably the most recent impact of living on water is the ecological system embrace that's going on with our community relationship. Looking at what it means to have compost, what it means to have waterfront care, fertilizers that are more friendly to the ecosystem and vegetation that makes that system better balanced. Community is a critical strength to a nation. I think if their communities are healthy, then the nation can be healthy. If their communities are breaking down for whatever the reason, then the nation begins to suffer. I think it's very important that the members of the community see the whole community as a responsibility. When you look at areas that are breaking down, like in the ghetto, the family structure breaks down first, and then the community breaks down because the individuals decide that they're going to pursue their own ends, that which is going to be good and fun for them or profitable or whatever, and they lose community preservation characteristics. So I think the importance of a community is just
had maybe community's interest in mind to a greater extent than even family or self.
Yeah, that's an important question. How do you balance this? Because you really don't want to fall off on one pole too hard. But I guess I would say personally, I fell off really hard on the community pole for a couple of years in Chicago, where the efforts that were needed were, or at least the ones that spoke to me, were community. We need to teach and work and plan and organize things that are really community oriented and allocating less time and less energy. With the give back process we're in with the arts and the ecological, we're probably putting more energy, more thought, more time into the community
Sense of that, even though you weren't under direct attack?
There's a camaraderie that you get with your fellow servicemen that goes on with other public servants like firefighters, medical people who have to put themselves in jeopardy for their fellows. But of course, in the Navy, you got a little less than an online situation. And of course, we were remote from where the battles were, so we weren't really directly addressing the issue of staying there.
As a child, there was a sense that your neighbors and your extended family and your friends and everybody was sort of watching out for you. The police, and you could walk 3 or 4 blocks away at almost any age, and your parents wouldn't be afraid of you getting lost or getting hurt, and they would be comfortable knowing that somebody would catch, send you back into the right place. Do you sense that was that true, what I just said, and if so, has it changed? Have you seen a change in that sort of sense of community?
Yeah, I think that was an advantage of our times. The community, the strength of the U.S. community, at least as I knew it, was in that you cared for and you would help your neighbors with their problems. I think it's shifted somewhat. I'm not sure what caused the shift, but I think when you analyze most communities, it's not quite the same. People, there have been stories where people stood by and did nothing while their neighbor was mistreated. I think the nature of our living patterns have taken us out of contact with our communities. First it was television, and then activities away from the home, and ethnic changes. I'm not sure what all the things were, but as you look around the houses here, I have no idea who those people are, and I'm further along than many because I've at least seen a list of what that person's name is at that address. Yeah, I think it's changed a lot. The thread which tied neighbors together, which was, well, for example, there would be a truck come down the street and sell ice or vegetables, and you would talk to your neighbors. You had a dealing there. Now when you go to buy ice, or you don't need to go buy it because your refrigerator makes it, you go to the store to buy something, the people you see there are not the people that live next door to you. They're in nature's supermarkets, and you don't know where they're from, so you don't have a community with the people that you go to the store for. Mildred and I were just trying to remember the name of the store that was like 6 blocks away where we used to go to for groceries, and that gave us a commonality that would run into our
Embedded
store.
Of community. Do you see this trend of impersonalization and me first? Do you see that trend continuing? And if so, where does it lead us? Or is there going to be a day of reckoning, so to speak?
Well, that's a tough question. It's a future question. It's a view into what's coming next. And I always find myself as an accountant writing down the numbers of what happened rather than being able to vision what's going to happen. I guess then you take on the tone of whether you're a positive thinker or one who's not too positive about stuff. I think society will figure out ways to keep itself going. I think it will produce a new kind of community, because since the beginning of time there has been community. I think a new one will come, and hopefully it'll have enough of the characteristics to make it a human situation and not just a mechanical, electronic era that doesn't have any human touching and human relationships, because that's what the earlier he did. You know?
You spent a lot of energy creating a community at work that had certain characteristics, and there was, I think, a certain degree of drivenness, a lot of drivenness, not a degree of drivenness, a lot of drivenness in you to create that environment and then to sustain it. But what have you tried to create?
I earlier defined what community was. I did not put in the economic pursuit, because I'm not sure where it fits in this whole process. But I guess you could say, all right, if you want to talk about where you are and who it is you're talking to, you're spending a fair amount of your life in your work environment. And there are people there, and there's geography there, and there's relationships there. So I guess work has to fall into the community rather than the family or the personal. So my take on job has been that, yes, I have found the human element in work. Looking back on some of the people that I really admire in the work, people who I've tried to nurture at work, that would be a community function, I think.
I remember you, not just recently, but through your whole career, talking about the importance of the socialization aspect at work. You wanted to engage people in conversation that expanded their minds. It's not just been with community, you've done that in the family too. You seem to be able to draw people out and have them express themselves. Why were you doing that? What's your goal, or what was your objective, or your thinking on that?
I think people's joy in life comes from human interest in their life. It's like if I talk to Ernie Pickler about the Dream Cruise, I'm talking to a man about something that really is at the heart of his life's joy. He finds great pleasure in talking about and looking at cars. That's just what it is for him. So if you can have questions that are perceptive, you want to have how are you, or what's your new car look like, it needs to be a little more perceptive. And link between that person's life and the subject that you can bring up.
We had come upon an important feature of communities, and when we say communities at that point in time, we were talking about this concept of linkage. A tremendous ability to create linkage in the communities that he was active in, and in fact, he was always a driving force in creating linkage. One of your strongest gifts. It's an incredible gift. In fact, I don't think I've met anybody that has a stronger ability of creating linkage, ability to create linkage in a group setting like you do. So I thought maybe that would be a good place. What is it that's going on in your mind? How is it that you're thinking about strengthening this community, and if linkage is the right word, creating that linkage? How do you do it? What's the secret?
That's really nice of you to say that. I'm not sure it's conscious. It's probably more unconscious. And the technique would probably revolve around identifying the members that are in this group or meeting
and where it is that their values are, where their emotions are, and where that particular person has to put itself into history. So if you take a situation, for example, dinner tonight, you have Emily at one end of the table and Kevin at the other end of the table, and they both have different agendas about what dinner should be about. So the question when you want to talk about linking the conversation or the activity that's going on, you say, what is it that is important to the participants in this group? What is it that they think is valuable? For example, Megan is conscious of the piano playing at the concert. And so my question to her is, help me learn about how the fingers are going on this piano. And she kind of lit up because she did in fact know about fingers on pianos because hers have run up and down the black and whites a lot of times. And she has consciousness of that. So when you're in a group, when you have 3 or 4 people there, you can't do the whole group at once. You kind of have to link up 1 or 2 members of the group. Sometimes you can hit on a subject where one person can expound about, for example, Megan could talk about piano and you have a little pen, and the other kids have piano, and Marion has piano, so that when she talks about that, there's a connection between what she's saying about her life experience connected to what she just saw that brings in the other people in the group. And when it's over, Megan felt pretty good about being able to share her wisdom. We felt pretty good because, oh wow, I know a little bit about pianos, and you know, now I know even more because she's experienced this concert and she's been able to recognize that. So linking for me is looking at your group and seeing what the people in the group have in common. It's kind of a common sort of thing. So to link is to say what's similar, what will connect in the group that you're with.
Like at the Economic Institute or in family situations. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the community produces demand patterns. When you go to a ghetto situation, the demands are obvious to those who are not suffering from the ailment that the ghetto has going on. So when we went to Chicago, we came from an environment which is we have enough to eat, we don't have leaks in our roof, we don't have muggings on the street. So we come as people who are looking at life that's a little more comfortable or less threatening. So here we are now in the ghetto of Chicago, and we're presenting ourselves as those who say life should be safe. So what can we do to make it safe? Life property that looks nice. So how do you get it looking nice? There we go. We find some people that donate some paint and some paintbrushes, and we start painting because part of the negativity in a ghetto is appearance. So you paint
More than just finding commonality, but it also seems to be injecting some optimism or some hope.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and part of the stimulation, there's a linkage element in that you take this hope that you have or this vision that you have, and you search out those who can have their images changed faster. Leela Mosley in Chicago was a woman who had lived in the ghetto all of her life, but somehow Joe Matthews, the kind of the lead visionary for the Ecumenical Institute, toward giving her the transformation that would enable her to become conscious of her setting and alter it in some ways. So there's a whole process that you have to go. You have to first paint a picture and say, look at this picture, this could be different. Painting, for example, as I said, we get paint from the old Sears store and say, you know, look, paint this. You see that? Doesn't that look different? Yeah, it does, you know. And then some people would be excited and lit up by the possibility for change. And of course, for us, it was a multiple part. It was the setting, painting. There was the mind images of the victim. In the ghetto, the principal down pressure on all the people in the ghetto is that they're a victim of this situation, that they don't have any power to change it. So how do you address a victim and say, you don't have to be a victim? I'm sure in your medical work you come upon patients who think, well, I'm sick, I can't do anything about it. And you have to inspire them to say, yeah, you don't have to be fat, you don't have to be skinny, you don't have to be weak, you don't have to be sick all the time. There are things that you could do. You can quit smoking, you know. So, there's a transformation that needs to go on.
Let's shift gears and look back over the last 70 years. Are you satisfied with the balance that you had between self, family, and community? And I think you could even argue that family is just a subset of community, but let's just use those three.
That's a good question, because I wrestled with it. Materials to prepare for this, and my conclusion was that when you think of balance, you think of, you get up in the morning and you have breakfast, and then you work, and then you have lunch, and then you work, and then you have basketball or whatever, and so that balance is a 24-hour allocation, and within the 24 hours you sleep and you do different aspects of what it means to be human. And I don't think that my 70 years is balanced per day. It's probably not even balanced per week. But I am comfortable that for 70 years it's balanced. It was heavily weighted in the economic for a lot of years. I didn't go to your tennis matches as often as you go to Kevin or your kids' activities, because I was trying to make a buck. So that now I go to activities that throw the balance in the other direction. Contribution to society really had immense intensity for a couple of years in Chicago, then not so much. And now again with the Birmingham Bloomfield Arts Center, we're back to the cultural give back. So I'm pleased, satisfied with the balance, although it wasn't a balanced balance. And I found joy in each of the elements, and that's probably the part that's comforting, is that I was able to enjoy each of the elements in the balance.
And if you could do it all over again, how would you have changed the balance, even though it would have come out in the end balanced? In the middle, what might you have done differently?
I think probably that since the success was in total, the improvement on success would be to have intermingled a little better, where you would have more time allocated in the course of a week or in a month in which you would do family, community, global, societal give-backs in a longer period of time. So for in your case, what you would say is, look, I'm going to work for Ford only so many hours, and then I'm going to share my wisdom at no charge to some social agency. Yeah.
Boy, that's tough, though. I think you're right. You would sacrifice your upward potential in any one of those areas by intermingling. The more you intermingle, the lower your trajectory on each one is. So it's a tough choice to make, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I think what it does is it defers the accomplishment. I got to be a CFO at age 42, and if I would have spent more time in social give back, I might have been 47 before I got there. The scary part is that if you don't, you won't.
Yeah.
You're thinking, if I don't work this hard at the
once said that you've married 3 different women, I would ask you, how many men has Mom been married to? What were the major phases, and what were the catalysts that created those different men?
I was driven overtime, make money, bring it home, not even see your kids walking kind of a guy. And now I'm trying to see all the kids walking that I can, all ages, grandchildren, what have you. So I think there have been at least three or four guys that she's been married to, but they were gradually changed. Probably the Navy was the catalytic cause of one change. It was just a kid who hadn't been in an airplane, hadn't been away from home, got on a plane and flew off to join the Navy. And that made me different. When I got to school and had kids to raise and funds to make, I'm sure my conduct changed. And then, obviously, the journey through the Ecumenical Institute in Chicago was a catalyst for significant change. Took a whole new look at life and presented myself, I'm sure, differently to Marion. So it would be those. And then, of course, the retired Carl is quite different. He's trying to drag her off into the bush, off on trips. And
Both of you, Mom and Dad, put your kids in a situation where they could be exposed to, an ecumenical environment, a broad sort of mix of people. You grew up in a mostly white neighborhood, correct?
yeah.
So what was it that actually, because and you were at that point doing some things that were not typical in terms of helping others.
Really tough question. I don't know what it was. Obviously it happened, and something freed us to do that. It was not an easy thing to decide to do. Not from our own desire to do the job standpoint, but the thrusting the children into this environment. That clearly got us disregard from our friends and family and anxieties and fears and concerns, and we had them all ourselves. However, there was a security in the environment there, the way the institute was set up, so you didn't feel like you're immediately going to get seriously hurt. But and I think also there was a subtle part of us that said we had fairly sheltered upbringing, and maybe you could create children that had another dimension to them than we had if they were to participate in an experiment. I mean, this purely was an experiment in human consciousness and human lifestyle and human activities. So I don't know what freed us coming out of a totally different environment to be able to do that. I don't know. I really don't. After Chicago, moving to Pleasant Ridge, there was a clear activity going on there in which we were educating Marion, getting her free to go out and earn money for the college, which we felt was so critical that we needed to have enough input financially so that you could pick a school to go to that was paid for. And so it was a kind of be frugal, continue exposing your children to new ideas, the Mexican trip and family meetings and so on, to give you guys a consciousness that was beyond what the kid next door had. The one spectacular thing that occurred during that period was the Bay Valley meeting. I don't know if you remember it because of your age, but that chart still exists, and what it provoked us to do was to write down what about the rest of your life kind of thing. And I think that shows up regularly in my the retirement phase. This has really been the fun one. My sweetie over here started the whole thing off. She gave up that busy workaday world and has now found some neat things to do for us. First couple of years were high travel periods. Now we have the joy of going to visit people that are our relatives who create gorgeous settings for us to visit in. So this is a delightful part from the standpoint of doing things and seeing things.
Maybe just pick one particular event that perhaps had the most powerful impact on you. Maybe just explain that.
I I think going away to the Navy as a young man was pretty powerful. The first part of it was to get on a train. I'd never been on a train before. We had to try to sleep in these bunks going over to Chicago. The rigors of boot camp training for a kid who just, really wasn't very physical and wasn't really prepared for the stress and the tests they put on you in boot camp. Famous incident in my life in boot camp was one of the things you had to do was to fight a fire. So there were about 6 or 8 people on this hose, and you had to go into this burning space with this fire hose. Right. And the guy that was on it got frightened and dropped the hose, which takes the water out of the flame and brings the flame towards the people. Right. Burned the top part of the front of his hair off, his eyebrows, his eyelashes were all burned. Fortunately, the second guy was a courageous one. He became a real hero. He picked up the nozzle and kept the rest of us from getting cooked. But that sort of a thing for a young guy going away. Right. It was pretty strong.
If you look back over your life, when did you make the biggest single mistake? What was it? How did you come through?
Well, I never really made any mistakes. We'll just conjure one up here, though. Biggest mistake. What happens to you as you mature is you have made a mistake, but then you get far enough away from it and you look back and you say, well, that wasn't a mistake, that was a good thing. I guess one of the things that hangs over me, still does, in fact, I was at a meeting in which this woman invited me to go back to Walsh to get my bachelor's degree. And I think probably if I looked over something that I didn't have that I could have had and maybe still could have, it wouldn't have changed much in terms of economics or occupation, but just inside, it's like something's not quite done yet there.
Right. You've been teased about this many times by your children, but your focus on threes and what those 3 things are, whether it's I think they've pretty much been the same, although over time it maybe have migrated, but the physical, the spiritual, intellectual, where did that come from, and I guess what point in your life did you begin to sort of formulate that, and how has it changed you, or what is the lesson there for posterity?
I think it probably came from Chicago. It's mind, body, and spirit. However, it's flowed over into hundreds of things. When I get ready to give a speech or make a presentation, it's an organizational tool that says if you don't have 3, you forgot something, and if you got 4, you've doubled up on something. It's just the way. More like brothers than fathers. I had, he was just an amazing guy as far as his economic and business accomplishments were concerned. I mean, he pulled himself up from very limited education to president of a corporation. So I didn't look over there. I did kind of look like I wanted to do better than my brothers. I guess there would be that sort of competitive aspect that was going on to outdo them. And my dad, in fact, wrote me a letter when I passed the CPA exam, and he didn't say anything about you're now ahead of your brothers, but I read all that in there because that's what I think was probably subtly dry. And it was his letter that did it. I mean, I knew getting the CPA certificate was an important thing in my mind and my drive and objectives, but when he wrote that letter, which I still have, it was very important.
Well, I want to stay with this for a minute, just to tee it up a little bit. You had a vision of, at that point, of being running your own business. And there were points along your career where you were thinking about ways to make that happen.
I don't know if I can ever point to a spot where I said, I'm striving to reach my father's position or not. I think I felt the economic moment where I thought I was now doing as well financially as he was. And of course, inflation can cloud your mind. So I was in public accounting. We were working so many hours and decided that I should leave it. And one of my good friends had an account, one single account that he was doing the work for as a CPA that he was going to give me, which would have been enough floor monies to be able to start my own practice. And it was close. I was just really thinking about it. But it would have been one lung, which is like one person, just me.
Right.
And I thought, what if I get sick?
Right.
Man, oh man, my children will starve and, you know, they'll all go down and eat, which is the struggle that anybody has going into the business. Is, I'm sure Kathy's folks had to wrestle with that question. You know, what if somebody gets sick? How do you keep this going?
It's the faithful couple. Two giant sequoias growing together.
Limbs grow out straight sideways.
Yeah.
And they're real short stubby. Some of them are real short stubby guys. And they're tiny.
So we've talked a little bit about the value of living in threes, and so now that we've talked about that subject, I wanted to get into those threes, and the first of the three is the body, and the next one would be the sort of the mind and then the spirit. So in terms of the body, let's just talk a little bit about sports, because that's kind of a natural discussion point. What were your favorite sports growing up, and tell us a little bit about what you like and what you don't like today in sports.
Well, the earlier years we had some games that they don't do anymore. Kick the can, duck on the rock, tappy on the ice box. I think hide and seek made it. I think they still have hide and seek, but so there were some interesting games that we played as kids in the street, because there were so few cars, and our street was virtually a dead-end street where you could play some games like that. Organized sports, I had two, I think, that would have given me some pride. When I was a newspaper carrier, we had a softball team, and that softball team won the west side of Detroit. We beat enough teams to be the west side champion.
Mm-hmm.
And we played for the city championship in a pretty exciting setting. The only thing was we only had one pitcher, and he fell on hard times in this city championship game. So there was no one else to pitch except Muma, third base, send him in. Wow. Things didn't get worse. They did not get worse, but we did lose the city championship. But we got all the benefits. We got uniforms and our pictures in the paper and a trophy, and so it was pretty exciting stuff. Tried running into people in a game called football, not soccer, but American football, and found that I didn't mind running into people. I mean, I wasn't a really big kid, but I somehow could find that certain joy in knocking somebody down and running into people.
Tell us a little bit about how you earned the nickname Brick Shithouse. Who coined that?
Well, we one of the places that we played, it was a cemetery. There was a part of the cemetery where they had not put any dead bodies yet, so we tried to create some dead bodies by playing football there. And there was a kid named Bankus, I think, that came to play, and I hit him so hard.
Bickley?
Bickley?
Ronald Bickley.
Was it? I don't know, somebody. I got that name. It was an honorable name to have at that time, to be so solid that when someone ran into you or you ran into them, they felt like they were running into something that was made out of brick. So then, so I decided to try that game when I got to high school. So I went out for they call them junior varsity now, but it was like the freshman team. And I found then that I hadn't grown anymore since I was 8 or something. I don't know, but these other guys kept growing. So
Right.
I played for a year, not really well. Didn't impress anybody, and did stay alive. But
found that the size difference was just too much for me to handle. Well, Marion and I played a little tennis. We did some walking. We took great joy in each of our kids' sporting activities. We had some tennis, and we had hurdles in our driveway, and we had
From Bruce.
yeah, high hurdles. We had flag football going on, and we had Donna took up skiing and gymnastics. So it's a lot of joy in watching those activities go on. Probably the one that got the most attention was Brian when he did flag football and then high school football. Probably more.
What about
hours spent watching that.
And then at some point you got into running.
Yeah, I don't know what the provocation was. I think Marion started that whole idea. She ran all the way down about 3 houses and came back huffing and puffing. Said maybe we should work on this a little bit. So in Pleasant Ridge we started making some moves. One of our joys was that we won a huge trophy in Belle Isle.
Right.
Because we had the most family members of anybody in this medical school sponsored fun run, I think, and that's kind of neat.
We had the fastest father-son combination.
Did we?
Yep. And we had the most family members as well. I think we had the fastest
Mother-daughter too,
mother-daughter and father-daughter.
because there was only one mother-daughter group that ran.
Another part of the body, or at least the physical activity, is your love of fixing things. So how the heck did you learn how to fix things? And
you know, there's a generational transfer that's really special for me there. My dad was really handy with just about everything you could think of. He built his own house, and you can see that called upon a lot of skills. Cement block and carpentry and plumbing and so on. And so he had this skills advanced pretty far, and when I was growing up, my brothers were gone, one to Florida and the other in World War II. So my dad needed things done around the house, so he would make lists of things, and I would attack them with the vigor of someone that knew what they were doing. And then he began to see that this was good for me to learn stuff.
right.
So when he would attack new things, like he put a new bathroom in on the first floor, and he had me helping him on that project, so I learned about what that might mean to put in a bathroom. And so these lists then became a source of economic enhancement, because he thought, well, I don't have to do it. I can have the weekend off when I get home, and my son can really add family value. So I started getting paid for doing these projects. One to share with is we had a green shingled roof, and I was up on this ladder with white paint, painting the wood frame around the dormer up there. The can got away from me, and I now had painted the green roof white with this white paint that rolled down, rolled down the green shingled roof, landed in the driveway. My dad was quite glad I didn't get hurt, but he was also a little distressed. But he said, "Look, I got a way to solve it." I said, "Oh, no, we can't change that whole roof." No, he says, "We'll just paint the white paint green. We'll get some green that matches the shingles." And so it still wasn't quite right, because the paint fills in a little bit where the stones are. But so he was the source of the transfer, and then economic necessity too. When you can't afford to have a contractor come in to remodel your bathroom, well, then you do it yourself.
What are your favorite projects now?
Looking back or forward, or
I mean, what's your
I guess I would maybe I'd give you one from each house. The Monte Vista house was, we decided to take out the old tub that was sitting on legs and put in a modern tub, and that would be 6 inches longer, right? So we took the tub out, and we found that we didn't have the 6 inches that we needed. And so we thought, well, we'll just take the wall down and we'll turn the studs sideways, and then we'll get this additional inches we need. Well, when we got all the plaster torn off, we found that someone ahead of us had already turned so the 4 inches we needed were not there to have. So I think your brother-in-law, Mel Savage, or somebody gave me the tip. They said, well, notch it back. The story for Madison Heights would be the remodeling of the basement, finishing it. And there again, another guru in my life was Marion's father, Earl Kittner. He came and did a significant amount of work helping us with that project. McLean in Highland Park had a couple of exciting things. We did the image plan there, so that the 5 global images were captured in the different rooms, like the black man and the yellow man and the white man and the tan man.
I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Then, of course, Pleasant Ridge had the 3rd level. I think would probably be one of the significant things. And there we started.
Now, did you get a permit for that, Dad?
No permit. and there was the beginning of passing the gavel over. The eldest son was instructed which end of the hammer to hold on to, and he picked up on that very well. Yeah. Still does. You watch him pick up a hammer now, and he's always got the correct.
Always gets the right end.
Yeah, and he holds it where you're supposed to. Doesn't hold it up too near the claw.
We are at 707 Cole Street in San Francisco. It is May 28th, 2002, and about 9:15. We are picking up where we left off with the question about handyman Mr. Fix-It, and we were on our way to Walnut Lake.
Wow, now that was a challenge. This place really needed work. There was a question about whether it was a tear down or not, and we concluded that it wasn't, and that's probably a mistake. Projects that we attacked that would be considered significant included the heating system, which was forced air system in the attic, which included air conditioning for the upper 3 levels, and a hot water system through high vectors, and some new copper piping in the lower level. But a significant improvement event there. We put in a circular drive, which turned out to be pretty helpful on a busy street on how to get in and out. Fireplace struggles. Finally ended up with a gas fireplace that really works cool. And hot tub installation, that was interesting. So my youngest daughter bought this place in Connecticut that was definitely a tear down, even more of a tear down than Walnut Lake property.
How did that lead into a career in finance?
And for Muma, the education was slow in coming. Actually, I was not a really good student. Better than most of my siblings, but my famous story on finance is that when I was in elementary school, you got they had some special pricing for milk, so that you could get white milk for 2 cents and chocolate milk for 5 cents with your lunch. And so I would convince my mother that I should have the 5 cents so I could have chocolate milk. And then I would buy the white milk and save the extra money. And I had a secret hiding place where I would put this extra money. And it was kind of like a bank sort of thing, only it was a hole in the ground where I would bury this money. And built up a gigantic fortune, as you can imagine. And so I started marking down how much I had and how it was going. So I think probably at age 6 or 7, I was heading towards accounting as a profession.
So looking back, do you think you chose the right career?
Well, in some respects, because obviously it turned out well
for our family economics, but the true statement of finance is probably not a true statement in my head. Finance, accountants, controllers, bookkeepers have a kind of a way that they look at numbers, and they like absolutes. They like things to be fairly rigid. You make a journal entry and there's a debit and a credit, and you know. And what I found was that I fall off a little more on the creative accounting side of things.
Right.
It's not getting such good press with Enron and some of those things, but my style was that the accounting ought to enable you rather than constrain you. So when I went to work at Motown and bounced around at some of these jobs, I really found that I wasn't really the pure model of an accountant that marked down the extra 3 cents from the chocolate milk.
Any advice you might give to your children or grandchildren about how to manage their career?
Well, I think looking back on career management, the strongest thing that comes to me is don't let it eat you. Careers tend to want to eat you. And I think as the next generation comes along, the pressure to be eaten by your career is even greater. I just admired my wife when she took her first job and could see that it was one that was going to eat her. And she said, you know, I'd like to change. It's not going to pay as well, but it's a job that I think is more who I am and what I want to do with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I changed job a few times, and I don't know that that was ever a factor in there for myself. I had some jobs I really liked, and I would tend to decide to like it after I had it, but in her case, I watched her have a job that was doing herself, not doing someone else's self. Because jobs can do that. They can be someone else's self.
So I think we'll move on to the spirit, and what does that mean to be Carl Muma?
Yeah, how are you unique from those people around you? Well, for me, I'm unique because of the body and mind and spirit experiences that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
I have probably a collection of things that no one else has had happen to them in their lives.
What are maybe if you think about what are the things that you feel define you the most, or the areas that you have the most passion around that kind of define who you are?
The three concept is one of the things that I have utilized to formulate ways to approach activities. Well, what are the three elements that you should consider? And he pushes on each of them to the 3 level below that. It was like the Motown Berry Gordy experience. When Berry Gordy came into my office and he said, "Who are you and what do you do for my company?" And in the matter of conversation with him, he discovered that I think in 3s, and so does he. Berry Gordy is a person who thinks in 3s. And we went into this wild period in which we tried to create the Motown Golden Triangle, which was to structure a corporate entity in triangular forms.
I mean, some of the areas where I see, and maybe these are things that come in 3s as well, but you have been a strong proponent of exposing your grandchildren and your children to the global environment that we live in, and some of the things you mentioned at our wedding, Kathy and my wedding, is that you should think about community and think about the broader context in which you're living in. So some of those themes are perhaps unique in this day and age where people think more about their own families and how much money they're making. But do any of those things strike a chord, or are there themes there that tie back to sort of who Carl is?
Well, I have to say that I'm really lucky in that I married a woman who was open to the planet. You get opportunities to see people grasp the new changes or reject them. Who are the people who are handling it well? And Marion and I have been both excited with Mildred because here's this gal who was 81 years old. We march in with a computer and put it down on her desk, and oh my, her life has just taken a jump into a new direction. And so the elements of introducing grandchildren to the world, children to the world, is that it's shrinking and that you best be conscious of the fact that it's just getting a little closer to you than it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other element that's included in this multi-part encounter that the next group's got to deal with is acceleration of change. Yeah, I guess the question comes more to me as, I wish I would have added something. That's a little easier to go to, is to say,
right. Well, that's true.
take steel drum band lessons, or pick up a college degree, or do welding, creative welding. I just got very excited looking at those wire vehicles that were in one of those shop windows. I don't know if you saw that, where they had taken wire and made trucks and so on. And it was a kind of a soldering with copper wire and other kinds of wire to make wagons like they went across the country with many years ago.
Sounds like what you wanted to change is you wish you'd been more artistic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, you had some forays into that.
I did. The stained glass was one, and I did some soldering.
When you trying to build, you were building those lights, those.
Oh yes,
flashing triangular
Yeah.
lights. It was a triangle.
Mesmers or whatever we call them. Right? Yeah, that's right. So they looked like when the lights went on and off, it was to the music.
Right. What good characteristic would you like to be able to pass on to your offspring?
Well, I think every once in a while you see something in one of your children and you say, yeah. And I'm really in the middle of one right now. And it has transferred. The capturing of the history to pass on to the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, within the three of you guys, you decided that that's worthy. That not only for your own benefit, but for future generations to have the information about someone. So that one made it. I don't know how it did it or why it did it, but that one got there.
Who have been some of the important role models for you? And sort of what did they teach you?
Well, obviously you have a strong opportunity to influence you, so he had a dedication to his family and to his business. You get some voices that show up, Joseph Campbell, Joseph Matthews, Phil Townley, that got up in front of you and said some things that provoked you to formulate new ways of looking at things. Probably the most admired person that I worked for was Jim Ludwig at RP Shear Corporation, CFO. Not only was he a good human being, but he was a role model financial standpoint. When we had the excitement of the garbage in our lawn and the commotion over the Bailey incident, he stood right up for me with the owners of the company who well could have dumped us in the trash barrel. That was not the kind of thing that these Grosse Pointers would think was correct in any way, shape, or form. But Ludwig stuck with us. And when we elected to go to Chicago, he packed up a huge amount of vitamins that we took over to Ghetto with us when we went. So probably the best human being I ever worked for. Frank and Val have been pretty special in our lives. They added to our family wealth by hiring us into a company that was pretty successful.
What kind of final words would you want to just leave in terms of the importance of spirit or religion, or just just to wrap up that final leg of the three areas?
I think the final word to the future of our family would be dig into yourself and calculate your value in contribution to the planet. Look at the dimensions of human suffering that are going on in the rest of the planet, and always have some part of what your mind and body are doing toward that. And it could be as simple as art, it can be as simple as meditation, it can be as simple as writing, reflecting, or it can be as grandiose as actually taking on an assignment to go into that part of the planet that needs your skills. Keep that in front of you.